2017, Andrew Yang was a nobody. Today, he has become a household name. Although he has dropped out, his campaign brought many new ideas to the forefront of American politics.
Yang Gang 2020. Yang Gang 2020. Yang Gang 2020. Yang Gang. Yeah.
Andrew Yang was born on January 13th, 1975 in Schenectady, New York. As a child, he was bullied in school for being Asian, which led Yang to take pride in relating to the underdog, or little guy or gal, as he wrote in his book, The War on Normal People. Yang majored in economics and political science at Brown University and then attended Columbia Law School. After graduating, he entered life as a corporate lawyer but quickly began to hate his job, stating that it was the 5 worst months of his life. He left his job as a corporate lawyer and became an entrepreneur. After several failed ventures, he succeeded with Manhattan Prep, which made Yang a millionaire. He then started Venture for America, a non-profit for young entrepreneurs to create jobs in struggling communities. While he was working on Venture for America, he saw firsthand the problems that middle America was facing and how dire the situation was. Andrew identified the culprit behind this job loss, automation, and he realized that Venture for America was not doing enough to curb job losses, and that it was like pouring water in a bathtub with a giant hole ripped in the bottom. For Yang, he had a scale problem. Venture for America could not do enough to curb automation. The only entity that had the skill to tackle this problem was the US government. Yang tried to get politicians in DC to solve these problems, but they didn't care. For Yang, the only other option was to do it himself. And that's when he decided he was going to run for president. Part of the reason Yang did so well, outlasting many well-established politicians, was his message. While other politicians were reciting the same talking points over and over again, Yang tackled real problems felt by many people. According to the Yang subreddit, part of Yang's appeal was that he wasn't a reactionary politician. Most politicians only start to act once a problem hits them full force, an example being the coronavirus epidemic. Yang, on the other hand, is looking at problems that will affect us in the future, and that's where most of his appeal comes from. This was demonstrated many times in the debates, as shown in this clip here.
Pete, fundamentally you're missing the lesson of Donald Trump's victory. Donald Trump is not the cause of all of our problems, and we're making a mistake when we act like he is. He is a symptom of a disease that has been building up in our communities for years and decades, and it is our job to get to the harder work of actually curing the disease. Most Americans feel like the political parties have been playing you lose, I lose, you lose, I lose for years. And you know who's been losing this entire time? We have.
This was a response to Pete Buttigieg in the New Hampshire Democratic debate, demonstrating Yang's focus on real problems rather than bashing Donald Trump. Yang took a very unconventional approach for campaigning. He focused on the internet, specifically sites such as Reddit, Instagram, and YouTube. What is largely credited to be the catalyst for his campaign was his appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, which was where many of his original fans came from. This internet-based approach led to the creation of one of the most influential fan bases for any presidential candidate. The Yang Gang was Yang's incredibly loyal fan base. They were a diverse group of people consisting of Democrats, independents, and former Trump voters. They were mostly younger people who were savvy internet users. They were responsible for volunteer efforts and fundraising, and they were very successful in their efforts. In the early days of the campaign, Yang had a problem because he received support from white nationalists and xenophobic groups. His campaign quickly disavowed this support, but they needed to find a way to quash the online hatred without a whack-a-mole effort, according to Yang's campaign manager, Zach Grumman. And this is what the campaign came up with. The campaign came up with Humanity First, which relies on unity rather than division. Humanity First inadvertently denounces all racism, bigotry, and hate-filled rhetoric, and the campaign can have moderators of online Yang groups follow these guidelines. This allowed the Yang Gang to avoid a lot of the toxicity that plagues other campaigns, particularly Bernie Sanders' campaign. Although Yang pulled in single digits for most of his run, he raised $10 million in Q3 2019 and $16.5 million in Q4 2019 because of the enthusiasm of the Yang Gang. Andrew Yang had one of the most loyal fan bases of any presidential candidate, so much so that 40% of his supporters refused to support another Democratic candidate, according to an Emerson poll. Andrew Yang had the enthusiasm, solid policies, and plenty of donation money, but one of his biggest bottlenecks was a lack of media coverage. Andrew Yang was omitted from many graphics and was asked the least amount of questions in many debates. The Yang Gang called this lack of coverage the Yang media blackout. Yang's strengths, his no-nonsense policy approach, and his refusal to attack other candidates were also his biggest weaknesses. It turns out that America wasn't ready for a candidate like Andrew Yang, someone who focused on policy rather than attacks on other candidates. Yang was expecting to have his breakout moment in the Iowa caucus, but we all know how that went. After Iowa, Yang did the math and saw that he was not going to win, and right before the New Hampshire primary, he ended his campaign, telling supporters,
"I am not someone who wants to accept donations and support in a race that we will not win."
Although Yang has dropped out of the race, he shows us what a 21st century presidential run should look like. His focus on forward-thinking policies showed us the real problems that we are facing today. Andrew Yang is still fighting for what he believes in, but through a different medium. He recently started a non-profit, Humanity Forward, which funds politicians running on a humanity-first platform, which includes UBI, human-centered capitalism, and other Yang policies.